But within all of that, there's that emotional content that's underneath it. And if you don't address that, you're not going to help them, because that's what we're up to. We're helping them transition, speaking of children, the family structure for what it looks like now to what it's going to look like in the future.
Right.
And I always say that the kids are the unwitting participants in the room, because the decisions that the parents are making are going to impact their children tremendously. And I don't care how old the kids are. I don't care if they're 6 and 8, or they're 16 and 18, or they're 26 and they're 28. They're still your children. And right, they're watching, they're intuiting, they're navigating themselves through what's going on for their parents. And we know that that's what's happening, and we're helping them help the whole family. When you talk about litigators, not only are they just interested in what's going to happen in court, but I think what's also happening is, and I tell this to clients who will sometimes threaten each other with, I'm going to call a lawyer. Your lawyer doesn't care about your soon-to-be former spouse, and your lawyer doesn't care, and nobody's even thinking about the children. But in mediation, I always say we've got our arms wrapped around the whole family and helping them make that forward move in a healthy, productive, dignified way.
Hi, I'm Rachel Green, Brooklyn-based divorce mediator and collaborative attorney, and this is my podcast, Keep the Kids in Mind. Join me as I chat with other industry professionals about everything from smoothly navigating your way through divorce to prenups, all the while keeping the kids in mind. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for tuning in. My guest today is Ada Hasloecher. Ada, I should have asked you how I pronounce your last name. I've known you all these years.
It's Hasloecher.
Hasloecher. Ada Hasloecher. And she is a mediator just like me. So we're going to talk today about how you can keep your kids in mind while you're going through this process. Ada, how are you today?
I'm wonderful. Great to be with you today, Rachel. This is going to be fun.
It's always fun to talk to you, Ada. That's why I invited you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So tell me, or tell everyone, what drives you to this crazy work that we do, where we sit in the room with couples who are fighting and trying to resolve things and worrying about their kids, and we spend our days with families who are in transition. What drives you to this work?
Well, I had been a commercial real estate broker for about 20 years. So I had skills in negotiating. And then I woke up one day and just kind of hit the wall and didn't want to do that work anymore. It wasn't meaningful for me. I've always been kind of a bridge builder and a fixer. And when I discovered the world of mediation, I thought you had to be an attorney to actually be a mediator. And I found out, no, that's not true. You don't need to be. And I heard about the training and I signed up for it. And it changed my life. I feel in so many ways that everything in my life led me to that moment to become a mediator. The last gig that I had as a real estate broker was I was a leasing director for a building in the Garment Center. And every day I was quitting that job. I'd get on the train to come home and I would say to my husband, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to do this job. And then one day I had an epiphany on the train coming home. And I thought to myself, this is like, I feel like I'm being trained for something here. I don't know what that is, but I really was kind of the mediator for the owners of the building, the brokers who were bringing deals, the tenants in the building, the deals that I was bringing myself, the construction that was still going on in the building. I was kind of like in the middle of all of that, sort of running the show. And then when I discovered mediation, I said to my husband, remember when I got off the train and I said to you, I feel like I'm being trained for something, but I don't know what.
This is it. Yeah.
This is it.
It's so funny. I had the same, I came from this profession in a different way, and I am an attorney, but I had that same feeling of epiphany when I took my first mediation class. I was just like, oh my God, this makes so much sense to me to sit together and try to find your paths to meeting each other in the middle and, figure out what is the disagreement that you have and why do you care so passionately that things should be done this way? And why does the other person care so much about it being done the other way? And like try to find bridges to close the gap and reach agreement. And it just resonated. I had that same feeling. I was like, this is what I was meant to do.
I
And I
know.
guess that's what helped us to persist to
Yeah.
get through the first few years of,
Yeah.
spreading the word and not having too many clients, and, and get through to the point where we both have thriving mediation practices.
And I also I train people how to do mediation work with Ken
Mhm.
Newman and Steve Abel. They trained me back in 2003. In fact, Rachel, I'm coming up to my 20th anniversary in June of 2023.
Wow.
And I want you to know that you were one of my early heroes in this work. I remember when I first became a mediator, I so looked up to you. I had so much admiration for you. And I remember thinking, someday, one day, I hope to have the confidence and the competence to do it as well as she's doing. So I just want, I
Oh,
don't know if I ever told you that, but I
you
want
did.
to tell you that now.
That's very sweet.
And, when we train mediators, you and I both know this. This is not for the faint of heart. It looks easy, and it is not easy. I've had so many attorneys say to me, I don't know how you do it. I
Yeah,
can barely stand being with one client in the room. I don't know how you work with both of them.
I
Seriously.
know. People say that to me too. I mean, I remember once I was working. I was working with a litigator. Actually, it was like an early collaborative case where we were trying to negotiate a settlement. And he said to me, I don't know how you do it. Like, I have clients who want to talk that much, and I pick up the phone and I go, uh-huh. And then I put the phone down, and then I go and I do other things. I look at my computer, I do my filing, and then I go, uh-huh. And then
Wow.
I put the phone down again. And I was horrified. People are like spilling their heart out to him, but
Right.
that's not what he thought his job was. He
Right.
was a litigation attorney. He only cared about what would be presented in court. He didn't care about how the clients were feeling. I mean, that was one of the things that really I found very fascinating, was the different way that the law looks at a problem and
Right.
people look at their own problems.
Yep.
Um, and I found that when I started my practice, that like if I started out saying, okay, let's talk about your children's schedule. What do you do for holidays? What have you done in the past? What are you thinking of for the future? If I lead them down the path, they'll follow me down the path. But if I open up by saying, what do you want to talk about today? What's going on? I would say 30% of the time I get answers that are not how lawyers would frame the problem.
Right.
They're the way people frame their problems. They're focused on the problems that are actually happening in their home, not necessarily the way that that it would be presented in court. And I think that's a much more meaningful way to discuss things.
Right, because there's an emotional content. Yes, we have to get them from point A to point Z, right? Because that's why they come to us, to get the work done. But within all of that, there's that emotional content that's underneath it. And if you don't address that, you're not going to help them, because that's what we're up to. We're helping them transition. Speaking of children, the family structure for what it looks like now to what it's going to look like in the future.
Right.
And I always say that the kids are the unwitting participants in the room, because the decisions that the parents are making are going to impact their children tremendously. And I don't care how old the kids are. I don't care if they're 6 and 8, or they're 16 and 18, or they're 26 and they're 28. They're still your children. And right, they're watching, they're intuiting, they're navigating themselves through what's going on for their parents. And we know that that's what's happening, and we're helping them help the whole family. When you talk about litigators, not only are they just interested in what's going to happen in court, but I think what's also happening is, and I tell this to clients who will sometimes threaten each other with, I'm going to call a lawyer. Your lawyer doesn't care about your soon-to-be former spouse, and your lawyer doesn't care, and nobody's even thinking about the children. But in mediation, I always say we've got our arms wrapped around the whole family and helping them make that forward move in a healthy, productive, dignified way, right? That's what we're up to in mediation.
That's lovely. I like that you have your arms wrapped around the whole family. That's
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
You know, when I've had numbers of times when I've said, for your children, you're still a family. You're always going to be connected through your children. You're their two parents. And I've had people be so startled to think of it that way. Like, instead of the end of the family, it's a restructuring of the family, but the family is still there from the perspective of the children.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I tell them, I know it's hard for you to think about this right now because there's so much that we're dealing with now, but I want to give you the longer perspective, which is that you're both going to be at their graduations. You're both going to be walking them down the aisle. You're going to be grandparents together. And the question that I want you to be thinking about is, what do you want that future to look like? Do you want to be angry and aggravated for the rest of your life every time you see your soon to be former spouse? Or do you want to just settle things with each other, agree that for whatever the reasons are, the marriage didn't work, but the relationship is still going to be ongoing in one form or another. And for your children's sake, you want to preserve that as much as you can so that they don't have to choose sides and feel guilty. And I know we're talking about holidays today. I always tell my clients the research, and you and I both know this, Rachel, the research is clear about children and divorce. It's not the separation and the divorce that makes children suffer. It's the parental conflict. That's what makes children suffer. And the only ones who can do anything about that are the parents themselves. So I tell them, you don't want your children to be the monkey in the middle, the go-between, and the secret keeper.
Oh, I like those three roles that you want to help them avoid.
Right.
The monkey in the middle, the go-between, and the secret keeper.
Because they know when if the kids come home from dad for the weekend and mom says, how was it? And they say something about dad's new girlfriend, and then they look at their mom's face and they're like, ruh-roh, I shouldn't have said that. So now they're wondering what else they shouldn't be able to reveal. And then ultimately she'll find out something that she should have known about so that she's not shocked and startled by it. And she can, kind of compose herself to be able to respond and not react, right? We talk about that also in mediation, right? That you want time to think about something so that you can respond appropriately,
right.
And not just knee-jerk react to it. Yeah. Because once the kids see that one parent is upset about hearing something, they're not going to say anything. So then when they come back to mom and she says, how did it go? Fine. Good.
Right. Because they feel that they have that sensitivity toward how the parents are feeling, right. And they feel guilty. They feel responsible for everything. Kids tend to, take that on themselves. I mean, I had a session that I remember vividly where the mother had had a boyfriend for about 2 years, but the children had met him and never told the father. Like, he found out in mediation that the children had met the boyfriend 7 months earlier. So for 7 months, these kids were going back and forth, spending time with mom and her boyfriend, spending time with dad, and keeping it as a secret. And,
right.
The father was just devastated. But like, I was devastated thinking about those kids and the burden
right.
that put on them, like how careful they must have been around their father to not spill the beans. Right. And it was so terrible.
I know. I mean, one of the discussions that I have with my couples in mediation is, and it's interesting because writing something in the agreement about this could be a little tricky, but I still think it's a meaningful conversation to have with them, which is this: when is it appropriate to introduce the children to a significant other?
Yeah.
Right. And also, when do you want to be introduced? Because this is going to be you don't have to love this person, but this person's going to be around your children. They're going to make sure their elbows aren't on the table and they're doing their homework, right? Yeah, I would want to know who's around my children.
Yeah.
Right. And people look at me like, I don't want to meet him or her, but I think it would be a good idea for you to be able to do that. It takes a level of maturity and sophistication to be able to do it. But I do discuss discuss it with them, and very often they agree that that's a good idea, that they should do that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I've had people push back on that as well. Like feel like, what, I have to get, her approval of that someone who I'm dating. And I say, no, it's not a matter of approval. It's just a matter of them meeting in a coffee shop, for 20 minutes.
right.
Just so that when when one of the kids says, oh, Mary went with us to the zoo, you Mary is in their lives, and you
Right.
go, oh,
Right.
how's that?
Right. I mean, I've had clients, because, if they follow up with me, sometimes I run into them at Costco, and, they'll tell me that, they've developed a really nice relationship with the significant other, whether they're married or not, to their former spouse.
Well, that's the ideal. I mean, I've come to realize that the reason that there's stories in the New York Times about these ideal extended blended families where there's, the father and his new spouse, and the mother and her new spouse, or or the mother and the father, or whatever it is. But,
Right.
they're all having Thanksgiving with the exes and their
Yeah.
kids. And, you have this big group. And then I realized that's written up in the Times because it's unusual.
It is unusual, but not impossible. They can
impossible.
actually do that. I
Yeah,
had a client years ago. They had three children. All of them were adopted. And when they came to see me, the youngest one, the adoption papers had not yet been signed. Okay, she was a baby. All right, and it was, it was tough. It was, it was a little rough, the mediation, but they got their work done. And a couple of years later, I got a phone call from the wife, and she said, Ada, I'm calling you because I know you would really be happy to hear this. So it turned out that they had, she was celebrating the July 4th. They were having a big barbecue in the back of her house. She was with somebody new, and the husband had remarried also. Everybody was invited. The grandparents were there, the kids, the new significant others had children. And she said, Ada, it was so fantastic. Everybody was so happy. It was such a joyous occasion. And I said, thank you so much for telling me that, because we know, Rachel, what's possible when people mediate, that this would never happen in a litigated case.
No.
The time they get wrung out,
Yeah.
the time, the money, the aggravation, and the whole adversarial system, I don't even know how they are even able to co-parent their children when they're litigating.
Yeah, they often aren't able to. And, and it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing. Like, the litigation doesn't, they're probably already ramped up and angry and hurt, so that that the litigation appeals to them, and they somehow feel like they can go through it and they can give it to their attorney, and they won't have to feel all those emotions. But it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work, because when you bury those emotions, it doesn't mean they go away.
Right.
And then what's going to happen is it's going to pop up at the most inappropriate time, almost like the frogs will come out of your mouth at that point, because you're going to be so reactive, right?
Mm-hmm.
So mediation, also gives them a chance to talk to each other, really hear what the other one has to say, what's really important to them, what each one is willing to give up because it's not as important, and they're getting other things.
And they're giving somebody else something that's important. But, it's also like building goodwill for the future. I mean, like changes to the schedule. I always tell people, you always need flexibility about the schedule. Your child's going to get older than they are right now. They're going to develop different interests. They're going to have after school activities. They're going to, you might move. The other parent might move. I mean, there's just so many variables. And I love when I have families that are able to say, sure, I will accommodate you for this change, because then when I need a change, you'll accommodate me.
Right.
And, I mean, that's the idea.
Right.
That's
the idea.
That's the best way to do it for the long term.
Right. I mean, when I
appreciate people who have that perspective.
Yeah. When I do the parenting plan with them, and some couples say, do we really have to do this? We're going to be good. I say, listen, yes, let's get this done. This agreement, this parenting agreement, the days, the pickup time, the drop-off time, the holidays, all of that, let this be a default agreement. I hope that you just let's write it up. Let's stick it in the drawer and do whatever works for
Do
the
whatever
two.
works for you, right?
Do what works for you. And if you find that you're not in agreement, pull it out and say, let's go to the videotape. This is what we agreed to. Or if we have to change it, come back to mediation. The one thing that couples will come back and amend very often, as you said, is the parenting agreement, because a parenting plan that you put in place with kids who are 5 and 8 is very different when they're 13 and, whatever. So I always tell them you need to be flexible and fluid and cut each other some slack.
Right.
Because the favor that you're asking for now, the other one's going to need the favor from, you're both going to need to, you need to be, look, the agreement's not static. We know that, right? So there's got to be some fluidity here, but having a structure and a plan kind of gives them like a roadmap, really, right? And then
I had one couple where the daughter became a very serious ice skater, and the mother wanted to move to New Hampshire so that she could be training more, with this one ice skating training center. And she was about 14. And they came back to mediation, so this was about 8 years after their divorce, because of these changed circumstances, but she wanted the father to agree. And actually the teenager came in as well. And, the 4 of us put our heads together to try to come up with, what would, like the daughter was able to really get the father to hear her, how much this meant to her, and she wanted to do it. And then, brainstorm what would make it palatable to the father to have them move up to New Hampshire. And then I had another case where the father became, well, I guess he had worked in government, but he was appointed ambassador of, I'm blanking now on, it was like Switzerland, I think. And their child was about 12, and they, so they came back in, and the father, I'm sorry, it was the mother's new husband who was the ambassador. So again, we like the father agreed that it would be great for his daughter. It was great education to go and live in Switzerland for 2 years. But he expressly said that his permission was only for 2 years. And then they talked about, her coming back for all the holidays and vacations, and, we had to work it out. So, I mean, you just never know what's gonna come up down the road.
That's right. That's right. We really don't know. I mean, the good thing about Zoom now, it does make people who live far away from each other, at least there's that immediacy of being able to see their children. It's not the same thing as, spending a couple of weeks together.
It's so much better than it used to be, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Ada, what are the questions that people ask you when they're calling to inquire about how mediation works, or what are the things you tell them so that they can know whether mediation is appropriate for them?
I do a Zoom consultation. In fact, I have one this afternoon at 12:45 with a new potential client. They've got 4 kids. So that's going to be, four children.
We hardly ever see that in the New York City area, 4 kids.
And my consultation takes about a half hour for me to explain the difference between mediation and litigation, the cost, the time, and like that. I go through the content of what we cover in the process, equitable distribution, child support, all of the things that we know, tax returns, how they're going to file, wills if they have them. I mean, things that they're not even thinking about right now.
You give them a list?
I explain to them in the
content. You just give them an overview.
Yep, I give them an overview, and then I give them an overview of the process. So there's the content and then the process, which is we're going to meet, you'll make your agreements, I draft a memorandum, hand it to a drafting attorney who will draft the settlement agreement, which is the contract. I do a review session with them. with the client. We read through the agreement from the first page to the last page together. If they're going to be splitting a retirement plan like a pension or a 401k, as you and I both know, I have to explain the qualified domestic relations order. So I tell them at the beginning, I don't expect you to remember everything that I'm telling you, but I want to give you an arc of the work that we will be doing together. And I want you to know that I will leave no stone unturned. I know exactly what we need to cover, discuss, what you need to settle on and agree to. Ultimately, we tell them this is a self-determining process. You're the ones who will make the decisions here. It's your life, it's your marriage, they're your children, your property, and you have to decide what you feel is in each of your best interest.
And then sometimes they ask me, but aren't you going to tell us what to do or how to do it?
Yeah. So I tell them, look, I can tell you, I can give you my opinion if you want it. At the end of the day, you're the one who's got to live with it. I can tell you what other couples in a similar situation have done to settle it. Sometimes we can tease out some kernel of an agreement that somebody else made that may make sense for them, so they don't feel like they have to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
Sometimes, they're just struggling and they'll say, Ada, can you tell us what to do? And I said, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'll tell you what you can do. Let me lay out 3 versions of what you potentially can do, and let's see if one of those might make some sense for you. Because it is overwhelming, Rachel. We're in this world all the time, but they have to think about the kids. If they're going to sell the house, they have to move. They've got to get the kids in a new school system. How are they going to financially be able to manage?
Right. And then I just say to them, okay, take a deep breath.
I know.
We're going to take it one step at a time. That you control the timing of this process. We will do this as you're ready. You don't have to decide everything today.
Right.
That's another benefit of mediation, is that they can do it in their own timing. And if if they're just adjusting to the whole idea of separating, they need to think about things for maybe a few months before they're ready to make decisions about what they're going to do in the house. Yeah,
absolutely. It's still going to be a quicker process in general than a litigated process, right?
Especially now, the courts are still so backed up. It's insane.
I mean, do you know that in Suffolk and Nassau County now it could take 9 to 12 months to get a final sign off by a judge once we submit the divorce package? It's unconscionable, actually.
It is unconscionable, but wow. Yeah, there are ways around it.
Right.
But it's kind of painful to think that people who have reached agreement are waiting a year.
I know.
After they did the work of coming to a settlement.
I know.
Yeah.
But we do the best we can, and we are doing really good work here. I feel so satisfied to do this work. I know how important it is. Families do not belong in the court system. I don't know why they have to go through the court system, but they don't. They really have a choice to mediate.
Well, the thing about litigation is that it's really ritualized war.
Right.
But your kids will never thank you for destroying their other parent.
Right, exactly.
And I think one of the hard things for parents is to realize, like, especially where there's a lot of hurt, and I think there's always disappointment. People don't get married to get divorced.
Right.
And there's sorrow, there's the loss of the future that you thought you were going to have. Like, there's so much going on.
Right.
But it's hard sometimes to separate, like, the hurt you're feeling from the need your children still have to have both of their parents, to be able to have strong relationships with both their parents. Even that person who hurt you, the children still need him or her. And and that's kind of sometimes a very hard thing to come to terms with.
It is. I just did a video yesterday on a wonderful quote from Benjamin Franklin, where he said that, better, the hard thing is to say the wrong thing at the tempting moment. Right? I talked in my last video about an Abraham Lincoln quote about forbearance, which means that you hold yourself in check when you're provoked, and how difficult that is. And there's a lot of buttons that get pushed, right? When couples are divorcing, there's shame and blame and make wrong and all of that other stuff. We try to focus them, as you said before, on what's going on right now and what do they want their future to look like. The past is still with them, right? And it's still pretty fresh and raw for them about, as you said, the disappointment and the anxiety about what's going to happen to me now financially. Am I going to meet somebody? What about my kids? When I think about like just the thought of like selling my house and what I would have to do it, pack it up. I remind myself every time I walk into a mediation that life as they know it is over. And now it's going to be something completely different. And they don't know what that is.
Right.
Right? They don't know what
And
that
how
is.
insecure that makes you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So listening, being there, I always say we have to be the Buddha in the room. That's what we do as mediators, Rachel, right? We've
Right.
got to be the calm in the face of the storm. We have to help them through the process. We have to listen for, the worries that they have,
Right.
and try to allay those fears by, as you said, taking it one step at a time. Take a deep breath, reboot, come back. Let's look at this again.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 10 steps forward, 1 step back.
Right.
But eventually they're going to get there.
Yeah.
And so many times, and I know you've had this experience too, at the end, they're so grateful. They thank me for, this was so much better than I ever thought that it could be, as sad as it is that we had to do it. We're so grateful that we did this in a mediation.
Right. I like to say that, my goal is that they've already been through the most painful part,
Right.
which is what led them to decide to split. And then this part I want to try to make as smooth as possible.
And we do. And, again, we know, the one thing about the New York State Council on Divorce Mediation, when I look around at our community, which we know is so generous, so loving, so beautiful, we're colleagues, we're not competitors, right? We always say that. When I look at the people who've been doing this work I still feel like a kid, and I've been doing it almost 20 years now. There are people who've been doing it 30 and 40 years. It's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And, these are just beautiful souls to me.
Well, it's so true. And I think all of us do this work because we care.
Right.
And I think about my clients like constantly. Their stories are with me all the time.
Yep.
And I'm honored that they let me in their lives, and I don't want to, make mistakes because people's lives are at stake and people's hearts. And I think that's true about most of the people who are in our field, that they really do care.
Yeah, I don't think you can have a sustainable, successful practice unless you, at the core of it, is that you care. It's funny, when we do the training, I tell the students, and a lot of them are lawyers, people in financial services. We're talking about adults, usually going, adding mediation to their practice or giving up what they had been doing and stepping into the world of mediation. But I tell them, we can teach you the skills, the techniques, we can share our experiences and all of that. But at the end of the day, the one thing that we can't do is teach you to care. Either you do or you don't. And if you don't, you're not going to be successful.
No, I know, because I've had I have an apprenticeship for, mediators who have been trained and then want experience, and they co-mediate with me for a number of cases. And it's just been interesting through the years to see who ends up, becoming a mediator. I mean, it really does take like a lot of skills.
It
But
does.
caring is part of it, and having the patience to let people find their own process instead of saying, okay, I know what you should do. This, and this. I mean, honestly, I feel like I never know what people should do, because I honestly like understand each person's perspective, and I see the benefits of both
Right.
of view. And, and when people say to me, well, what do you think we should do? I say, uh,
Well,
what I do is I go back to, like, for other cases that I've had, and I say, well, I've seen people do this and it has these benefits, and I've seen people do that and it has those benefits, and then there's also these 3 other things you could consider, but I can't make the decision for you because you know what? They're not my kids, they're your kids. I raised my kids. Now you have to raise your kids. And you don't want to do it. Like, it doesn't matter what I think, because I wouldn't put my kid in that program, but that's what you want to do for your kid. And it will work for your kid. It wouldn't work for me. So don't ask me my opinion.
It's so true. I have a friend, my friend Abra, and her favorite funny line when people say this to her is, you know what I would do if I were you? And she's like, how could you possibly know what you would do if you were me? You're not me. And that's really what we're talking about.
Right.
We're dealing with personalities and temperaments and desires and family history and where you are in the lineup and what makes you who you are.
Right.
And
and I mean, there are families where the kids always had tennis lessons. So, like, they wouldn't dream of not having tennis lessons for their kids. It's an important thing for both of them. And, my kids, I mean, I've never played tennis in my life. So I didn't raise my kids. I didn't give them tennis lessons when they were little.
You're a bad parent, Rachel.
It just wouldn't have occurred to me. It just wasn't my family history, I mean, and there's like myriad numbers of things like that. Like, and people still have the right to raise their kids the way that they in the vision that, and and sometimes I'm struck by how similar, like, the parents are still in agreement. Many of the families that do come to mediation are not in conflict about the kids. Some of them are, but many of them are not. And and they're unified in wanting to protect their kids from the conflict and helping them get through as smoothly as possible. And that's why they're choosing mediation with that hope. And I'm often struck by how similar they still are, even though they're divorcing. That they're still aligned on their visions for their values for their children.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, occasionally you get where they're not seeing eye to eye, and I tell them, you didn't see eye to eye probably while you were living under the same roof together. So that's not going to change now. But if you don't want your children to suffer, you're going to have a united front and have an agreement about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And listen, I had a situation where recently where the dad, he was much stricter when their daughter was with him. He made her, when she came home from school, she had to get her homework done right away and then, have dinner and take her shower. And the mom was much more loosey-goosey. And the mother was complaining that the daughter comes home and complains. He said, I don't care. These are the rules in my house. And she could do whatever she wants when she's with you, but when she's with me, that's the way it's going to be. And yeah, I mean, I had a couple of years ago, the wife was I think she was a vegetarian, and the husband, when he had the kids for the weekend, would take them to McDonald's, right? And so I asked her, I said, does he listen to you now about that? She said, no. I said, all right, so he's not good. So when the kids come home, you'll give them broccoli, and when he's with them, they're going to McDonald's for a Happy Meal.
Kids do okay with that, though. They can hold, like, kids can hold, like, sometimes people say to me, how can you be neutral? And I go back to that. This is how your kids see you, because kids can hold, like, the two realities in their minds at the same time, that, like, mom feels this way and dad feels this way. And when I'm at mom's house, I do it, A, and when I'm at dad's house, I do B. And they don't have, they're okay with it. As long as the parents don't nag the kids or complain about it. Oh, your father and your mother is, then the kids are going to be okay with the different sets of rules.
And that's what I said before about making them the monkey in the middle or the secret. So now they're going to come home from dad and they're not going to tell mom anything, which is going to make her nuts. Like, what do you mean you didn't do anything? Because they're afraid to tell her.
Right. Or they're afraid to say, I had fun with dad.
Right.
And that, yeah. And then they feel guilty. Like, mom was home alone and I was out with dad having fun. I don't want to tell her. And, that's a lot of pressure to put on kids.
It's a terrible pressure to put on
Mhm.
kids. It's hard enough to be a child these days. When we were growing up, Rachel, we came home from school, that was it. We didn't have social media. The continuation of the school's, social world had ended when we came home from school. We played with our friends in the neighborhood, but our school friends were our school friends and our neighborhood friends were our neighborhood friends, and never the twain shall meet. It's now it never shuts off for these kids.
Yeah.
So for parents to add another layer of burden onto them because they don't want to hear that they had a good time with mom or dad.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I talk to the parents about, sometimes I'll have a situation where the mom will say, I don't want him to have the overnight in the middle of the week because, for whatever the reasons are. And I say, being the residential custodial parent and having the children like 80% of the time, you're going to be really happy when they're with dad.
Yeah, I know. I've said that to clients too. Like, well, that's one of the benefits of divorce is that you get weekends off from your children. And then you're so happy to see them. I mean, I think that is true that some parents like become better parents afterwards because they don't have the other parent standing over them criticizing their parenting. And
Right.
then they also can like do their chores on one weekend and then give the children much more focused attention on the next weekend when they have them. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. There are some benefits to
I agree. I mean, I had this one couple where they were negotiating the drop off on Sunday when the dad had the kids for the weekend, and he wanted to bring them back at 3:00. And she said, no, you're bringing them home at 6. If I want to go out, I don't want to have to worry that I have to be home at 3. It's my weekend and I need the time. So, and this is all part of the negotiation, right? This is what we help them do.
So Ada, are there any people who you would say should not mediate or should not try mediation? Or
I'm always a little cautious with domestic violence. I know there are
families who have had very high conflict.
Yeah, and can be dangerous too. So I wouldn't say that
you have to be able to say what you're really thinking and feeling without worrying that there's going to be revenge taken.
Correct.
If you don't agree.
But other than that, even high conflict couples, high net worth couples, and I've had quite a few of those as well, they're not sure if mediation is going to work for them. And I tell them, let me make a suggestion. Let's do the consultation. Let me explain the process to the two of you. And maybe try one mediation session and let's see how that goes. It's kind of like chicken soup. It can't hurt.
Yeah.
You can always litigate, right?
Right. That's true. It's always easier to go from the lower conflict, the lower, competitive, adversarial to the higher. It's harder to come back the other way because things are said in the adversarial process that people can't forget and people get hurt.
But I will tell you this, I've had a few clients who started the litigation process and called me up and said, can we do the mediation with you because this is not who we are. We don't like what the lawyers are telling us. That's not how we want to do it. We know we want to do this amicably and we want to do this in the best interest of our children. So I have had a few people start the litigation process and go, no, not for us.
I guess I had one couple that came in and everything the wife said, the husband said, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing it that way. No, I won't read that book. No, I won't consider that. No, I've already decided this is what's going to happen with the house. And they're the only couple I think that I can remember that I fired them. I wrote them both a note after the session. I said, thank you for coming in and trying mediation. I don't think it's the right process for you because it really requires that you be willing to at least listen and consider the other person's point of view, even if you don't agree. And I did not see that ability to listen or consider what her point of view was. So.
And and you and I both know what happens. So they'll go to the lawyers. They're going to make compromises because nobody gets everything that they want. It's going to take a long time. It's going to cost them a boatload of money. I always ask them, whose kids do you want to put through college, yours or the lawyers? Right?
Yeah.
So, you know, sometimes I
And
have to.
sometimes people say, I want my lawyer's kids to go. No. I've had people say, I'd rather give it to the lawyer than give it to her.
I've heard that all, and that's when we know this is not a mediatable case,
Right.
right? If there's that kind of revenge and vengeance and vindictiveness going on for somebody, and they're just going to hold on to that, you know, then good luck. Good luck with the litigation, right?
Yeah. Well, Ada, it's been a pleasure. We've covered a lot of topics. I could talk to you for another 2 hours, but I won't do it on camera.
Good to
Is
see you.
there anything, any place people can reach you? You've mentioned a couple times that you have your own video. Is it a video blog, a vlog?
It's a video blog. They can go to my website, which is www. I'll give you the easy version, dfmcli.com. And that stands for Divorce and Family Mediation, longisland.com. Although now with Zoom, Rachel, I mean, I'm seeing
You're
people
not limited to Long Island.
all over the state now, which
All
is
over
really
the state.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too.
Or they can call me at 631-585-5210. So thank you for
And
this
I think-
opportunity. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, it was really fun. And I think your contact information will all be in the show notes. So
Excellent.
people
Very
can
good.
find
Thank
that
you.
there. So thanks so much for taking time out for your busy schedule, and get back to work helping families through.
You too. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.